stop doing that or something you don't like will happen to you. That's what no means.
Right.
And so when he was 9 months, he was starting to take books off shelves and get into the plants and so on, because he was starting to crawl around. And so to teach him what no meant, I just grab his leg when he wasn't doing something that I didn't want him to do. And, you know, he would squawk and bitch and complain, and I'd say, no, no, no. And I'd just hold him until he gave up, and sometimes he would cry. And the reason he was crying is because he was frustrated and angry that I was mucking about with him. It's like, fair enough. He wanted to go explore. And, you know, fair enough, kid, you want to explore. But you can't tear out the plant and get dirt all over the rug. And you can't go into the electrical cords, you know, like, no. And no. And so I had done a lot of behavioral training by that time. And by the time I did that for, say, 6 or 7 days, and soon as if I just said no, he would just stop, and sometimes he would cry. And then the week later, if I said no, he'd just stop. So it took like 2 weeks, eh? And then I knew that if I said no, he would stop. And so then I could let him explore. I could give him a lot of freedom. And then I'd have people come over to my house with their 2-year-old or 3-year-old. And because they had never taught the child what no meant, they never gave, because they didn't want to impose on their freedom, let's say. They couldn't give the child any freedom at all. They had to wander around behind them all the time because they never knew what the child was going to get into. And so then you start to hate your child, right? Because instead of having a bit of free time and just being able to say no to this kid while he's playing around on his own and giving him some freedom, you're just nonstop monitoring this child, and you're mad because you don't have a life. And we had another couple come over, and they had 2 kids that were like 4 and 5, and they were just horrible. We sat down to eat. We wanted to have a conversation, and we put a basket of bread out, and the kids just grabbed the bread and they ate all the centers out of the bread. And the parents were all embarrassed about it, but they didn't do anything to stop it. And, you know, in their minds, they thought, well, aren't we permissive and nice, and we never say no to our children? But they didn't notice that they actually hated their children, because how could you go to someone's house and you want to have a conversation, you just met them, and your children embarrass you to death, and you think you're not going to get resentful about that?
Right.
And you think you're not going to take, and so here's how people would take it out on their kids. So imagine that happens. Now you go home and you're pissed right off, but you're not going to let yourself know that because you're such a nice person. Then your child goes off and draws a picture. Maybe they put a lot of work into it, eh? Then they come running up to show you. And that's a real good time to give them a pat on the head and say, look, isn't that great? But you're pissed off because you were embarrassed. And so you look at it and you think, and that's all you have to do. It's like, that's not really worthy of my attention. You don't have to say anything mean. You just have to not attend in this manner. And then you got your revenge. And you think you won't do that, man. You know nothing about yourself. And you know, you read in the paper sometimes, these mothers or fathers, they do something brutal to a child. And I know I know how that happens. It's like no disciplinary strategies in the house. The kid is driving the mother or father crazy. You know, and then maybe the mother or father, they're hungover one day, and maybe they just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and maybe they got, you know, hell from their boss who's a tyrant, and they haven't stood up to them. And the kid does the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. And maybe he's actually pretty good at that by then. And it's like, out comes Satan himself. And all hell breaks loose. It's like, I wouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, there's almost nothing you wouldn't do. You just don't know yourself very well.